Another day in the Gunners Club.
Welcome you here in the Gunners Club with myself, Gunner, and of course with Seuss. And how are you, Seuss?
Oh, I'm a lot better now. You know, the nectar of the gods. And my specific one today is the Dueling. Yes.
Well, charge your glasses. Seuss, when's the last time that you have seen a public duel or some sort of ritual spat over honour?
In a movie?
Yeah, probably in a movie. You don't see a lot of it in public anymore, and I think there's some reasons for that.
There should be, though.
I think you might be right. Well, today's topic is the art of the duel.
Or the lost art, perhaps?
The lost art of the duel. And I think really in the past, dueling was something which was really amongst the aristocracy or levels of the officers in Europe. Mm-hmm. That's basically where it was confined to. Something that started off pretty much around the time of the Renaissance. But from the start of the Renaissance onwards, this has been part of Western culture. But it's been something largely confined to the upper class. You see, we're all about class here today.
Class.
And also the officer class in the military as well. Now, it was in Romeo and Juliet that Juliet decried, the horror that her only love had sprung from her only hate. She's talking about the family enmity that had gone on between her family and her lover's family for centuries, and of course the tragic end when she takes her own life because of this enmity.
Yep.
Possibly, duels was one way of getting away and around from this enduring enmity or hate. So really uncovering what the problem was and settling it in a ritualized manner. And this is something which has gone on a world tour, this notion of dueling. It found a stronghold in Germany, moved across, of course, to France, and found a seat of popularity in the southern states of the US. There's record as well of duels taking place in Australia. But since you've got an Irish whiskey in your glass, so it was really the Irish who first codified, so simply put down in writing or in a book, the etiquette for having a duel. And this goes back to a year that's very easy to remember, 1777. You've got all the sevens there. Now, the Irish like the ritualised fights. For example, if you've seen the movie Titanic, where they draw a straight line on the ship deck and you toe the line, you put your toe to that line, so does your opponent, and it's fisticuffs.
Oh,
yes, to move
yes.
off the mark.
Yeah.
Johnny Cash walks the line, that sort of thing. But really, no matter what country in Europe you're in, or whether it even went to Australia or to the southern states of the US, they pretty much follow that etiquette.
It didn't just stop at the southern states, because it sort of followed on as a ritualised thing, as like the gunfights, come out at 12 at high noon to come out into the street, with your six-shooters.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, and that's pretty similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
So essentially under the Code Duello, that's the Irish code, which is basically practiced in the rest of the Western world. They had some certain points written down. The first one was that there had to be a slight. Something had to have happened. You must be offended by something. Now, the offence could be, it could be one of honour.
Oh dear. Imagine that coming back today. That'd be duels happening everywhere. I mean, everyone's offended these days.
You're pretty much right. So somehow you had to be offended. It could be a matter of honour. It could be a matter of love, the affairs of the heart with a woman. Let's face it, for a man, that translates to a matter of honour in any case. It could be a financial betrayal or someone seeking restitution from a contract, something like that. Now, if this slight occurs, the first thing which must occur is the chance for the person who is slighted to say they're offended and ask for it to be retracted or to be made good.
That's fair enough.
Otherwise, there's really no need for the duel, other than the fact that, the person's blood is basically boiling. If it's not taken back, then a challenge must be offered. Now, a challenge can be done verbally, or it can be done in writing, and believe it or not, it used to be done mostly in writing. And the challenge would have to say what the problem or what the perceived slight is.
Okay.
So they'd know, okay, I'm expected here for a duel, and this is the reason for it. Well, that's perfectly fair and reasonable, isn't it? It's like in court today. You understand what the charge is before you face the court.
Yep.
Before you face the music. What you do then is you'd appoint a second, and the other party would have a second appointed for them as well. You know, someone that they trusted, someone who would make sure that the terms of the duel were fair, so both parties had a chance to come out of it. Okay.
Was there also where you could appoint someone to stand in your stead for this said duel?
Very rare for it to happen. It would happen mostly if
You'd bring in a ringer, wouldn't you?
Well,
a dead shot or something?
The idea is that you're defending your honour. So socially, if it made you look smaller by appointing someone else as your de facto, that would be the very reason why you would not do that.
Oh, okay.
Now, not only that, but there'd have to be a real disparity in status between yourself and the person who'd slighted you. So, for example, a monarch.
Okay.
Someone slightly lower than a monarch would be able to deliver justice
without
the need for a duel, let's say.
Yeah.
But that would really be the only reason for that. Or if the person who had been slighted was handicapped, let's say, old and infirm would be another reason. So the idea is to have a fair contest, and that's really what the seconds do. They make sure that, for example, if there's weapons, that the weapons are of the same standard. If there's ammunition, that they've got the same ammunition. And in terms of a duel, the weapons were generally rapiers. Now, rapier is a straight sword. It's something which came from around the Italian region, Italy and Spain. And they can be quite long, actually. They're quite horrific to look at. They can really do some damage. But the terms of the duel were all important. Now, the seconds, as well as making sure things are fair, it's their job to try and mediate and see if they can extract an apology and a mediation before the duel.
Oh, okay.
So
even up to that last second?
Yep,
oh,
even
okay.
up to the very, very last second. And then if that can't be basically evinced, then what they do is they carry on with the challenge itself. Now, recently, in fact, last night in bed, I couldn't sleep. I was reading Chekhov's book, The Duel. Now, this was written around 1890 or so, and even at that time in the story, it was described as an anachronism. And there's a humorous scene where they're preparing for a duel, and the seconds had never been witness to a duel before, because even by that time it was something which is quite old-fashioned, an old hat. And the two seconds are talking to each other about their remembrance of the rules of a duel through Russian literature that they'd read. So sort of a comic sort of thing, but what wasn't so comic was the poor chap who'd been invited to the duel was woken at 4 o'clock in the morning, was put into a carriage, a horse-drawn carriage, and was taken 8 miles out of town and was ready as the sun came up for the duel, worrying about what would happen to his life. Was this to be his last breath that he'd actually draw? Now, a duel didn't have to be for the death. There were 3 ways usually that it worked. And remember, the idea was to resolve something, bring it out in the open, and have a socially acceptable conclusion to it.
Okay.
Okay. So you could do it to first blood. He who draws first blood is the winner. Now, with a sword, that's pretty easy to do. If you slash someone on the cheek, for example, and drew blood, you could be, under the terms of first blood, be the winner.
Okay.
Or it could be that you fight until the other party is incapacitated. Now, that's not so rare. Think of UFC fighting today or boxing.
Oh, yeah.
That's essentially fighting till the other party
is they tap out
incapacitated.
or whatever.
Yep, that's right. And the other one is the fight to the death, which was less common. Now, in the book The Duel, a person who was officiating took it upon himself to say, my normal terms are 15 rubles per participant. However, if one of the party dies, the person who succeeds owes me 30 rubles.
Yes. Either way, I get paid, in other words.
Put into all of that. But it really made me think about what is the purpose of the duel and why don't we have duels today? Well, the purpose of the duel is to bring out a problem in the open and to have very swift recourse to restitution. And the restitution could be as simple as through an apology or through the social spectacle of drawing blood. And remember, the idea of drawing blood is something which it's very profound in the human psyche. I mean, there's a reason why blood is red, and there's a reason why we perceive red as being, passion, emotion, danger. And there's a reason why, when we look back to Old Testament Jewish psyche, that the drawing of blood from, let's say, the scapegoat is so important. So it's a real visual social cue. Now, in Chekhov's book, the deacon couldn't resist. He said he was tempted by the devil and came along. He said, I can't attend because I'm in a state of grace. but clandestinely he turned up and he rushed to the aid of the person who fell. And he said, well, although I was tempted by the devil, thank God that I've come and that I've been here for it. Why don't we have feuds today? And I believe it's because our societies are so much more complex and our cities are so much larger. Our cities are so much larger, which means we've got access to the courts. Now, in England and Australia, common law, basically, we used to have an equity court, and that would deal with civic matters instead of criminal matters. That's sort of now been subsumed by the other courts that we have today. But the fact that we have the courts, that we have the solicitors, that we have prisons that we can put people in instead of put them at a public trial with rapiers, I think is a reason why we don't have that so much today.
Or even stocks, for that matter.
Yeah, or even stocks.
They should bring that back, I think.
I've got set views on that as well. I think in many cases we should as well, particularly for debtors' courts.
Yes.
Yeah. But don't forget as well that duels was really something for the upper class. It wasn't something that the middle class or the lower class had recourse to. What's so interesting about Chekhov's work is that he goes through the psyche and the emotions of the two parties before the challenge. You have one who is a zoologist who believes very much in what we'd effectively think of as social Darwinism today, that the weak or the morally corrupt basically should die, and that we should have the stronger of the species, including morally, should continue. And he finds the person who is challenged to the duel to be morally inferior to him. However, during the fight, his blood pressure raises and he finds occasion to hate the person he's fighting. But after he's injured him, he actually starts to feel compassion. And in fact, 3 months later, there's a conclusion of the story when he goes back to the person he's injured and sees that the person has actually changed his life around and has human qualities, ones that he couldn't identify before the duel. He notices that he's got a relationship, that he has to work hard and earn extra income to, raise that family, etc. And so really it's a talk not just about the feudal system or how petty a feud can be, but the human condition as well.
That's very deep.
That's
very deep.
Yeah.
I prefer to think of this subject along the lines of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That guy.
Just outside the marketplace?
Yeah, where he's swinging his sword and doing his whole thing and he just pulls out his gun, bang. That's how you do a duel.
Well, it's certainly a fight. It's certainly a fight, but it's not a duel because remember, there's no seconds, there's no challenge, there's no chance to issue the apology. And even in Chekhov's work, there was an apology that was given. But the other party said, I don't accept the apology, I want blood. And he was allowed to continue with the duel. So sometimes an apology wasn't enough and it actually would come to that, to one party being killed.
Well, there you go. I think they should bring it back.
I could see a lot of applications for it today. We stage our feuds today on the sporting ground instead. And effectively we have people, chase a piece of pigskin around a field, and they're essentially our proxies, and we paint our faces with colours.
So it's not halal?
Well, you could talk to me about kosher laws, but I'm not sure about that.
I'm just curious.
What do you think? Do you think we should bring duels back? Do you think there's a reason why it's illegal in Australia?
Or the stocks even. Crucifixion! There's a go!
Yeah, very different reason. Cruci is the Latin for torture. It had a very different purpose than a feud.
Yeah, well, it would.
Or a duel.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking wide. There's applications for these.
You were thinking of selling stones, weren't you?
Yeah, I was thinking of live streaming, pay-per-view. I reckon that would work. Hey? That way, the offended party, the party that has lost in this transaction, he can get paid from the funds out of the money that's coming from the pay-per-view, out of the live streaming, and it would be a public attraction that people would tune into. You would be surprised how many people would tune into something like that.
I don't understand why we don't have recourse to something like that. For example, if you're a big fan of Breaking Bad, you might remember the spin-off Better Call Saul.
Yes.
Season 6, Episode 6. So Saul Goodman has been constantly undermining a business partner, Hamlin, and Hamlin actually gets him to attend a boxing gym Saul Goodman's not aware of what he's doing, but he's forced to glove up and meet him in the boxing ring, and they do a few rounds together. That's very much similar to a duel, I think. And really, they sort it out there. The only difference is Saul Goodman doesn't make amends and doesn't change his ways, like in the book The Duel by Chekhov. He continues to be the cad that he is, and nothing really is resolved other than a person feels some psychological satisfaction for a short period of time. But I think really it is a methods of recourse and one way of stopping violence. It's ritualized, it's controlled. The fact that it's controlled is a reason why I think that it can reduce violence in society so much.
A boxing ring.
Yeah.
You know, dictated by laws, dictated by rules.
Yeah.
And ultimately a winner is declared.
And it's amazing in boys' schools, or in the army for that matter, just how easy it is to settle a difference between men. And how once it's been settled on strength or by skill, how the person who loses will accept that position.
Yeah. And
usually there's not continued squabbling or backstabbing after that. There has been an honour standoff between the two parties.
Yeah.
And I think that masculinity's been forgotten by government today.
I believe so.
Yeah.
You're right. Yes, exactly. I was going to say, unlike women who hold a grudge for a long time, men seem to be able to get over it quite quickly.
It's probably not elegant, the manly art of biff, but it's there and it's bred into us and it's going to continue. And if it's controlled and it has a purpose, I think it's actually a valuable tool.
Yes, it is. I agree with you. Bring back the duel, I say.
And we'll see you on the next video.
Good on you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one.